Man, who doesn't love some pork chops? And there's so many different ways to cook them. You can grill them, you can fry them, you can barbecue them, you can bake them. Today we are doing a spice rubbed, oven broiled pork chop, and I've got my special spice rub on these, and I've got the ingredients listed below. And this is a rub that I use for lots of different pork dishes. I use it for pork chops. I use it for my pork shoulder. It's just very, very versatile. But in this case, we've done the nice spice rub. And you look at this and it looks like it might be a Greek dish. But then you taste it and you realize there's some like Middle Eastern spices, and there's lemon juice in there, there's rosemary. So it's just a wonderful mixture of all these wonderful flavors. So this is our spice rubbed, oven broiled pork chops. For our spice rubbed, oven roasted or grilled pork chops, we are going to be using a kind of a medium thick pork chop. And the reason we're using these is a lot of times you'll see pork chops that are really meant for pan searing or frying. So we're going to use a pork chop that is probably maybe a 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch. If you wanted to do this same recipe using a thicker pork chop that you want to grill, you could certainly do that. All the steps are the very same, except that at the very end you want to rest them in some foil in order to finish the cooking and to let the juices come back to the center of the meat. In this case, these are thinner pork chops that are, like I said, a 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch, and they will cook rather quickly. So we've got our pork chops, and the ingredients are pork chops. Our herb that we're going to be using is rosemary, and we're going to be using some squeeze of some lemon juice. And then we've got our pork rub. And this is my special pork rub that I use for this particular recipe and for a couple of other different recipes. But in the rub, we've got a 1/4 teaspoon of Berbere, which I've mentioned that before. It's probably be my favorite spice. We've got a teaspoon of chili powder, hot chili powder. In this case, I'm using a Kashmiri chili powder. Then we've got a 1/2 teaspoon of ground coriander, a 1/2 teaspoon of ground cumin, a 1/2 teaspoon of fenugreek, 2 teaspoons of garlic powder, 1 teaspoon of smoked paprika, 1 teaspoon of, I'm using a salty coastal pepper, which is a special black pepper from Madagascar. It has a wonderfully floral scent to it, but it is actually a black pepper, and it's kind of a salty seasoned black pepper. And then we're using a little bit of coarse sea salt in that. And we've got a teaspoon of dry mustard. In this case, I'm using Colman's dry mustard. And this is just a fantastic dry mustard from England. It's Colman's dry mustard, and I would imagine any dry mustard will do. But that is what's in the rub, those ingredients. And those ingredients will be listed below as well. So we've got our pork chops, and again, anytime you are cooking a protein, chicken or pork or beef even, you want to let that come to room temperature before you start cooking it. In this case, we've got a spice rub that we're going to use. So for this spice rub to stick, we're just going to add a little bit of olive oil to our pork chops. And once we get that in there, let's get it all rubbed all around, get everybody oiled up. And now what we'll do is put in our rub. And again, this rub has a little bit of spice to it. It's not really that hot, but there is Berbere in it. And I've mentioned before, Berbere is it's a wonderfully fragrant spice, but it can definitely have a little bit of a hot kick to it. So we're going to rub those fairly liberally, but we've only used a half teaspoon of Berbere in the mix, so we should be good to go on that. And they shouldn't be that hot. But it's kind of a mix of a Middle Eastern rub, and then we've got the rosemary and the lemon in there. So, you know, it's still French, I guess. So this will be our rub. And what I like to do is do this a little bit early so that I can actually let these chops marinate for 30-45 minutes, something like that. And you can, while your oven is heating up, they can sit there and marinate. So that is going to be our rub for that. And we've got our oven on, and what we'll be doing, we're going to be broiling these in the oven. We're going to be using the grill under the top of the oven to broil these. And as I said, if you have thicker pork chops, you could certainly do that on your grill outside. And the big difference is at the very end, you would want to take these out, tint them with aluminum foil, and let them rest so that the juices then come back to the center of the chops and they can concentrate all of that flavor. You don't want to lose any of the juice. So we're going to let these marinate for a few minutes, and then what we need to do actually before we do that is we've got our rosemary here. I almost forgot. We're just going to tear this rosemary, break that up, and we're going to roll our lemon because we're going to actually be juicing this lemon. So we're going to roll it like that, and let's cut it in half. And we'll go ahead and cut it in quarters, or actually eighths. We're not going to squeeze it just yet, all the way just yet. We'll squeeze some of the juice out of the lemon, but we're just going to put the lemon in there and let that be part of our whole marinade. So what we'll do is we'll cover this with some cling film, some saran wrap, and let that marinate for 30 minutes or so. Once your pork is marinated for as long as you can possibly let it marinate, I mean, you could let it go all day if you wanted to, but once it's kind of to that point, then we will now just cover a roasting pan with some, we're going to use grapeseed oil in this case because it has a high smoke point, a high flash point. It can get very hot without burning. So we are going to cover our pan with that grapeseed oil, and we're going to put the pan in the oven and let that get nice and hot. We want that to be nice and hot so that when we put our pork chops in, we want to get a nice sizzle. We want them to get a little bit of sizzle and char on the bottom as we start roasting them. Now, one of the things I may not have spoken about at the beginning of this, well, I did talk about it, but if you have pork chops that are really thick, say 1 inch to 1.5 inches thick, then you probably would want to do them on the grill. But the great thing about this particular recipe is it's specifically for pork chops that are, 3/4, half of an inch to 3/4 of an inch. Pork chops that you could normally you could bread these and pan fry them or something like that. And we're doing something actually a little bit healthier in this case. We're going to oven roast them. But the thing about this is that we're put them in the pan, and we're not putting them on the rack because we want them to actually cook in their own juices. So when we put them in the pan, they're going to develop a little bit of caramelization, and we'll let them cook on one side, and then we'll turn them over, and we'll be able to baste them with their own juices from that pan, which is not something you'd be able to do on the grill. So if you, like I said, if you have thicker pork chops and you're going to put them on the grill, the big difference is that you would grill those pork chops on both sides, and when you take them out, you would do them just like you would do a steak. That is, you would set them aside, you would tint them and let them rest that would bring the juices back into the meat and also, you know, in the pan, and then you could baste those with some of those same juices. So that's the main difference between using a smaller pork chop or a thinner pork chop here that you could pan fry or that you can pan sear or oven roast, and using a very thick pork chop. Our oil has been heating in the oven, and our oven again is on about 190 to 220 centigrade, 375 to 425 Fahrenheit, because we want it to get nice and hot. So now we'll just put our chops in, and you hear that nice sizzle there. That's what we're going for. And we want to make sure that when you put your chops in, that they are not overlapping, that they are everybody is laying flat on the pan. So we'll do that. And now we'll get those in, and now I'm just going to place the rosemary and the lemon slices, or the lemon wedges, around the meat here. And we've got a few more of our lemon wedges that we could put in. And we want to make sure those are nice and well distributed throughout the pan. And we're not squeezing these just yet. We're squeezing them just a little bit, but because we do want a little bit of that flavor getting on our pork chops for right now. But once we're going to let them roast a little bit, and then once we flip these, we will then squeeze our lemons and get some of that juice on the pork chops. So that's the beginning of this, and we'll now stick this back in the oven and let it roast until we get a nice little crust on the bottom, and then we'll flip them. Hey everybody, it's Walter from Artistic Gourmet Adventures. My wife Kim and I own this unique small group tour company where we host groups of 6 to 12 guests for 1-week luxury adventures in beautiful locations throughout Europe and the United States. I have the privilege of being the adventure chef, creating and preparing daily gourmet meals for our guests. So, in this video series, from our cozy home kitchen here in the beautiful Loire Valley of France, we will demonstrate a wide variety of recipes, from culinary classics to originals, as well as covering professional kitchen techniques for the home chef. For more information on Artistic Gourmet Adventures, check our website, linked in the description below. So now we've got our pork chops in the oven. So we've had that oven on a pretty high temperature to get the oil nice and hot, and we have put them on the pan, and now we've put them back in the oven, and now I've turned the grill element on, you know, the grill element at the top of the oven, so that it cooks from the top down. So now we've got a really nice hot oven, so they should be nice and get a nice little caramelization on the bottom, but also be cooking from the top at the same time. So we'll leave those in for probably 15 minutes, and then we'll check them. Our pork chops have been going now for probably 15 minutes in the oven, and boy, let's take a look at this. Get them out. Look at all of the juices that have come out of those pork chops. And that is all the juice that we're going to be able to use to baste them with. So what we'll do now is we're going to flip them over, and get a little bit of browning on that side. You can see a little bit of caramelization that's taking place here, and we'll finish it up. But boy, just look at all of the pan juices that we were getting out of these things. And let's just baste them a little bit with some of this juice. Not that we really need to, because it's just about filling the pan up. So we'll turn those over and we'll put them back in. And actually at this point, what I usually do is I'll go ahead and squeeze a little bit of the lemon juice out of the lemons. And they should be nice and lemony, as well as plenty of rosemary flavor. So now we'll put these back in, and now we are grilling these at the top of the oven, right underneath the grill element, because now we really want a lot more caramelization on top there. So we'll put those in and let those get grilled up for a little bit more. Okay, I am ready for these pork chops. They should be fantastic. Let's see here. Oh yes. I love when I open the oven and I see a little bit of sizzling going on top of the bone there. Beautiful. Okay, those bad boys are ready to go. I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to baste a little bit before we put them on our platter. Then of course we'll baste them again once we get them on the platter. And you know, at this point, if you wanted to drizzle just a little bit more of the seasoning over there, you certainly could. It certainly can't hurt. So let's do that. And now we'll just we'll plate these on this nice beautiful platter. Look at these pork chops. Succulent, and look at all of this juice. I mean, we didn't use any chicken stock, no wine, anything. It's just the juice from the lemons and from the pork. And now we're just going to spoon some of that over the top, and that will be our plating. Very nice. And there we have it, our spice rubbed, oven broiled or grilled pork chops. If you enjoyed this video and you'd like to see more, give us a thumbs up below and hit that subscribe button. It's free. And ring the bell if you want to be notified as soon as we release a new video. Also, let us know in the comments if you have any special recipe requests. We really appreciate you tuning in. See you next time.